The doors of your car will close automatically. Please keep your head and arms inside and remain seated at all times. And please, no smoking. Thank you.
Matterhorn Matt presents Matterhorn Mondays.
Hey there, Mountaineers. Welcome to episode 15 of Matterhorn Mondays. I'm Matterhorn Matt, and this week my guest is Alex, a historian, along with Manny from Ready, Set, Disney. And for the listeners who don't know who you are, Manny, why don't you go ahead and explain your channel and what kind of videos you make?
Easy. Hi everyone, I'm Manny. I host the channel Ready, Set, Disney on YouTube. I sometimes upload videos on the history and facts of Disneyland. I make annual trips out there each year. I actually live in the country of Australia. I have a huge passion for the company of Disney and the thematic entertainment that they provide at their parks, and also the movies, and I just enjoy discussing it online with everyone.
Alright guys, for those of you that don't know who he is, you should definitely go out and give him a subscribe because he makes really awesome videos. And Alex, for the new viewers out there, why don't you go ahead and explain your channel too?
Sure. On my channel I have 3 different shows. One of them is a fun little lecture series that talks about the history of the rides of the park all the way up until today. I also have a show where I talk about my thoughts on projects and things happening around the resort. And finally, I have a vlog series where I go into the park and talk about items and places of historical interest.
Yeah, guys, I say this every week. You should definitely go out and give Alex a subscribe because he makes awesome videos too. Not just Manny over here, but and you guys are in for a real treat this episode because this is the first time we've done a podcast with 3 people, and hopefully everything will go smoothly. I'm guessing it will, but let's see. This week's topics are: does Disney rely too much on nostalgia? And there's a topic I like to call the Disneyland Problem, which I'll explain later on. And we're going to talk about the Indiana Jones adventure. So, as for the first topic, does Disney rely too much on nostalgia? This question could really go either way, depending on your, outlook of the company as a whole. And I'm sure a lot of grumpy Disney fans out there will say, yes, they do rely too much on nostalgia. I want new things in my movies and my parks. But let's see. Alex, why don't you go ahead and start us off?
Sure. Well, Disney has always relied on some kind of nostalgia. In 1955, it was Walt Disney who wanted people to kind of feel the nostalgia of being like on Main Street, for instance, and kind of seeing what it was like to live around the turn of the century in America and experience the kinds of things that you would see back then, like milk trucks running down Main Street or horse-drawn streetcars, things like that. I mean, even in Frontierland, some people who were old enough would remember things like stagecoaches and things like that. Mm-hmm. And so Walt Disney always liked the idea of nostalgia, and I think even to this day, Disney does a really good job of having nostalgia in the park, and this time the nostalgia is your memories of being at Disneyland when you were younger and recapturing kind of your youth at Disney. So the short answer to my opinion would be that that I don't think Disney relies too much on nostalgia. But there certainly is a lot of nostalgia that they rely on, so it's interesting. I like it.
Let's see, Manny, why don't you go ahead and give your thoughts on the subject?
Well, in the regards of Disneyland relying too much on nostalgia, to me it depends on how we're saying it. If it's like in the ways of merchandise stating when rides open and stuff, or calling back to specific lines, or say like in the fireworks shows, like e.g. Disneyland Forever, when they'd say, Remember Dreams Come True, where they often make callbacks to your memories at the park and it's about you. And I think it makes you really, as Alex said, think back to your family memories and just get your heart warm and fuzzy thinking about what's happened there, because usually for most people, or for everyone, always good memories happen at Disneyland.
Mm-hmm. And the way I really see it is that there's, I guess, kind of two types of nostalgia. One is the warm, fuzzy feeling, like you mentioned. With your family, you're having a good time at Disneyland, you're watching the fireworks, and, the fireworks bring back the memories of the past trips you've had. But then there's the nostalgia, and I like to call it, I guess, like the cheap kind of nostalgia. Like, I saw on Twitter a couple weeks ago of one of my Disney friends on there decorating his Christmas tree with I think it was a great movie ride, what is it called? Ornament. And I remember seeing that they were selling, like, Goodbye Great Movie Ride, or even with Ellen's Energy Adventure. And those are really, I don't want to say I have a problem with that, but it's just a really cheap way, at least in my opinion, to get people to buy, just the specific merchandise for, like, an attraction closing or just something like that.
Yeah, okay, there's one kind of nostalgia that I really have to mention that I don't like at Disney. And people are going to hate me for it, but when I saw the show Disneyland Forever, the fireworks show at Disney, I really disliked it. And it's because, well, okay, so if you remember Dreams Come True, that one was a wonderful trip down nostalgia lane where you kind of, got to relive your fond memories of all these classic Disney attractions and things like that. It was a great show. But then with Disneyland Forever, which was supposed to be a fireworks show about Disneyland's 60th anniversary, the entire show was only Disney music. And it really had nothing to do with Disneyland. Mm-hmm. And so what they were trying to do was they were like, oh, well, we're going to make everyone feel all fuzzy and nostalgia over all this classic Disney music, but it has nothing to do with Disneyland. Like, they had like the Jungle Book scene, like what's that song?
I want to be like you.
Yeah, yeah, they had that, and the Jungle Book is represented nowhere in Disneyland. So what does it have to do with Disneyland? It was all about just getting people to feel fuzzy over Disney songs, and the whole show had nothing to do with Disneyland.
I think I've joked with my family before that sometimes I think Remember Dreams Come True and Disneyland Forever should have swapped titles, because one of them has to do all with Disneyland and the attractions themselves, while Disneyland Forever is more about the movies and that sort of stuff, without making very much mention to the park itself, other than like the opening and closing scenes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was gonna bring up about that Disneyland Forever. The only really mention, like you said, about Disneyland is the opening scene where they're talking about the orange groves and Walt Disney. They have that classic Walt Disney cry moment. Everybody in the crowd is bawling their eyes out, including me, by the way. I don't know, but there's for me, there's just really something. Oh man, I really can't explain it. When I first saw Disneyland Forever, the thing that really got me was, well, I mean, it's not new probably to all of you guys out there, but I remember when they played the Frozen music and they made it quote snow with all the bubbles everywhere, and that was just a really, I don't know, I just felt like really heartwarming to me, not just because of the song from Frozen. I know I've said in the past that I don't like Frozen, but I mean, it's a subpar movie, but I mean, I'm kind of contradicting myself. I'm digging myself a hole, but no, it's just kind of heartwarming to me. And I remember rewatching it on YouTube a couple months ago, and then comparing it with my viewing experience from the other fireworks show that we were talking. I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but
Remember Dreams Come True.
Yeah, that one. That one is nothing but Disneyland. I remember the Haunted Mansion, they did a scene for that, and Indiana Jones Adventure, and a whole bunch of other rides, and it's just really, I don't know. I like remember. No, I already forgot the name of the fireworks show, but I like the other one more than the 60th anniversary one. Yeah. I'm really bad with remembering the names of the fireworks shows, by the way.
Okay, so So you're saying that you like Remember Dreams Come True over Disneyland Forever?
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I agree with that fully.
Me too.
I didn't actually see Remember Dreams Come True during its inaugural 50th anniversary run, because the first time I visited the park was in like just after the 50th in the late 2000s period.
Mm-hmm.
But the first time I saw it was in June this year with like all the new projections.
Oh yeah.
And even prior to the trip, I used to listen to the soundtrack for the show. Something about it just really spoke to me, and seeing it in person, that just made it like my literal favourite Disneyland fireworks show. I don't know if it's about the nostalgia, it probably is, about the music and everything about it. It just feels so Disneyland to me. I love it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And kind of going off topic, but I really love the way, I don't know if you guys have seen, but for the fireworks show, I believe they do projections on, what's it called, the facade of It's a Small World during the fireworks. Yeah, I think that's just like a really nice touch for those viewers who can't get, like a seat like right in front, or Main Street is too crowded. You can just kind of nestle off to the side over by It's a Small World, and it's kind of weird to turn your head to look at the projections and then whip them back and forth to see the fireworks, but it's just a nice touch.
So I love that idea, because it sort of disperses the crowds in a way, and it makes you feel as if, because like prior to the projections being added, you sort of felt like you were missing a visual element of the show, even though there was like very minor projections on Sleeping Beauty's castle, I think, for like magical and stuff like that. But it just, I don't know, it just adds another element to it, brings more layers to the show.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure we could go off on a whole different tangent about projections kind of taking over the Disneyland fireworks shows, but I guess we can probably save that for another podcast. But let's see. Do you guys have anything else you'd like to say? Whether Disney relies too much on nostalgia?
Well, sort of going back to the point you guys made about merchandise and stuff like that, I feel like sometimes the way they call back to it, saying last day and all that, I feel like it's really hit or miss for me personally. Like, they can either do it very, very well, like, say, I remember some of the Tower of Terror merch was pretty decent when they changed that out for Guardians in January, but I don't know, a lot of the Great Movie Ride, Ellen's Energy Adventure stuff felt very, like, slapped together last minute. Even the way that they sold some of it, I saw on Twitter, I think, don't quote me on this, but I think they put out like carts by the exit, like very unthemed carts, and sort of just set up there and sold them without any real purpose other than, making money off the merchandise. It just felt kind of weird to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that really calls back on last week's topic. I'm really bad at remembering things, but I remember a specific topic we were talking about last week on... it was the topic that I couldn't think of a shorter name for during the episode, but then I finally thought of a shorter name for after the episode. I don't know if you guys remember what the title of it was, because I'm blanking.
You certainly don't. It's What Made You Lose Your Respect for Disney.
Yes, thank you.
I listened to that podcast. Good episode.
Oh yeah, thank you. And yeah, that just really goes back to Disney's kind of money grubbing, cheap merchandise for attractions closing, vintage attractions closing that people experienced in like the late 80s, early 90s, and yeah.
Yeah. That's a very interesting topic. Mm-hmm. Love that idea.
Oh yeah, absolutely. What about you, Alex?
Okay, well, I think like a lot of the merchandise that they sell is like, I don't know, kind of strange. Like, I think that it relies on the nostalgia of you loving like characters and things like that. Like, for instance, I saw this merchandise the other day at the park, and it was like a baby Winnie the Pooh, but like he was dressed as a girl. And I thought that's the weirdest. Like, at first I just was like, oh, it's a baby Winnie the Pooh dressed as a girl. And I thought, wait a minute, why is Winnie the Pooh dressed as a girl? And I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on? And then I was like, why would they have this? And it's like, oh, it's because they wanted something that specifically was targeted towards girls, but went off of their nostalgia for loving Winnie the Pooh. So that was just something that I just was like, what?
There's a market for that?
I guess there is.
What? That's the weirdest
I
thing
can't
I've ever
explain
heard.
it. If anyone is listening to this show and knows what I'm talking about, there's a baby Winnie the Pooh that's in all pink and he's got like a bow on him and everything, and I'm just like, why? What is? Oh.
I
We should get someone to tweet us a picture of it.
I mean, yeah, merchandise is like a whole other subcategory that we could really
Yeah.
delve ourselves into, because a lot of the merchandise, I feel, is really lazy. Like, okay, I'm just gonna kind of go off on a tangent here. There's
Okay.
some merchandise out there that I like to call the Etsy merchandise, because Disney basically copies all these Etsy shops out there with their, like, I don't know how to explain it. They're like generic T-shirts. Like, there was one that was oh my gosh, I can't remember. It was a T-shirt, and it was like something about turkey legs, and it was like every day I turkey leg or something like that. It wasn't that exactly, but I'm sure you guys can picture what I'm the kind of merchandise I'm talking about.
Yeah, yeah. You see a lot of that on fan stores, and in recent years you start to notice a lot of it pop up in the parks, and like it's as if they're really targeting like the super fans who'd understand those sort of inside jokes, like the APs and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, that's the kind of merchandise I like to, just like stray away from, because it seems just so cheap for Disney to make those kinds of, I don't know, I can't really explain it. You guys are just going to have to go out, look for yourselves. I'm sure you'll find the T-shirts I'm talking about on the front page of the Disney Shops app, but yeah. And let's see, let's go ahead and move on to our second topic, which is the Disneyland Problem. And this is a topic that I came up by myself. Hopefully no one else out there copied my idea. But basically, the Disneyland problem, as I describe it, is the fact that Disneyland doesn't have as much space as the other parks worldwide, say Walt Disney World or Disneyland Paris, to fit in all of their IP-centric themed rides or lands, like, Marvel. And we have to resort to quick rethemes of entire chunks of the park, like Paradise Pier and Guardians of the Galaxy, which took over Tower of Terror, or even demolishing entire chunks of the park for, say, Star Wars Land. And also the fact that California Adventure is basically Disneyland's IP. I like to call it the IP dumping ground, because that's really what it's becoming. And I know Alex and I have touched on this a lot in recent episodes, but I wanted to dedicate an entire topic on today's podcast for it. So, Alex, why don't you go ahead and start us off?
Oh, me? Oh, jeez. Okay. Well, basically, I agree with you that the fact that DCA has become a dumping ground, and it's really sad because, like you said, there's not very much space in Disneyland Resort, and so it becomes a matter of like, what do we do? Do we get rid of a whole section of the park, or do we destroy parts of the maintenance areas to expand the parks, and so when it comes to DCA, they've decided to retheme some areas. They only have one section of space left to expand the park, and it's a small parking lot just south of the Guardians of the Galaxy Tower, and I almost said Tower of Terror, and so it's just, I don't know. It's interesting to see what Disney tries to do. Like, I've heard of plans in the past to reroute Harbor Boulevard a few hundred yards over in order to make more room in the resort area. But unlike Walt Disney World, there just really is no room left. And when it comes to the recent thing of making IP-based attractions and lands, it's like, how much room do they have really to expand? I mean, they're going to run out of space really fast at this point. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's a good idea that Disney um, destroy certain areas of their parks to make way for new lands and things. Like, for instance, we have the Autopia area, that had the People Mover track going through there. That's a huge section of space in Disneyland that isn't really being used properly compared to other parts of the park. And so that would be the next expansion area. But before they even get to that, they're going to retheme Tomorrowland. So you can kind of see, the problem here is how they manage retheming the park in order to create extra space.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I mean, definitely, everybody out there can see this. I remember there were rumors a while back of retheming Tomorrowland to a Marvel Land, and then they decided to push it to its own, I guess, quote, well, it's not really its own land. It's going to take over a lot in a California Adventure. But yeah, you can really see Disney doing a lot of I don't want to say damage. I'm going to say damage. A lot of damage to the parks with this sort of just IP hammering in different IPs, different IP-based attractions to please I'm guessing the younger demographic. But Manny, what are your thoughts on the Disneyland problem?
Well, I think it's a really interesting topic that we could just go into for hours on end, because there's so many different sides and perspectives that you can go at it on. But to me, it all depends on... I think Rob Players, another channel I'm a big fan of, has stated this before about getting rid of attractions and stuff like that. To me, as long as the thing that's being replaced, the thing that's replacing... An attraction that's replacing the old attraction is better than... Oh, God. I can't phrase this. As long as the new attraction that replaces the previous attraction is better than it, then I think we should be able to get rid of most of the stuff in the parks, as long as it's like not, Pirates of the Caribbean wholly untouchable. But yeah, it's really interesting, because especially since, like, I'd say 2015 onwards, I think we've really seen the IP hammering sort of come in. I'm not sure if that's when Chapek took over. I don't want to track that all back to him like many do, but I don't know. I think first saw it with Guardians Tower. Now Pixar Pier, probably the most common example. Instead of just sort of reconstructing and revitalizing the whole areas, they're sort of just retheme of an IP. And I don't know if that's what, seeing as we're super fans, we probably don't agree with it. But like as a regular guest, how would they view it? Would they view it as something new? Because I remember a few weeks ago, I showed my dad the concept art for Pixar here, and he said, so it's the same, but with red tubes on California Screaming and new buildings. Once you break it down, what else is there to it, Do the general public really view it as a, like, say, would like a kid go, oh, they got the Dash Coaster now, it's a retheme of Screaming, if they could even understand that. We need to go back to the park. Is that what would draw people in, or something completely new from the ground up like Cars Land?
Oh boy, yeah. I mean, when it comes to just lazily retheming existing attractions like California Screamin' with the Incredicoaster, which is to whoever named the Incredicoaster, I have a personal beef with you, because that is one of the worst names you could have ever chosen for a roller coaster. Or it could also be the cleverest name to whoever came up with it. But anyways, yeah, I remember when Guardians of the Galaxy first took over the Tower of Terror. I wasn't very excited to get to Disneyland to ride it. I mean, I knew it would basically be the same as Tower of Terror, and I'm guessing it's going to be the same with California Screamin' and the Incredicoaster, but I mean, it really depends on the mindset of the guests. I mean, they're really there just for the experience as a whole. Normal guests don't really care about, like, the backstage drama when it comes to this kind of stuff. They kind of, I don't want to say they just don't pay attention, because they really don't, but unless, like Manny said, we're super fans of Disney, but yeah, what about you, Alex?
I have a certain, I don't know, like, thing I wanted to bring up, which was, okay, so you know how Disneyland itself has like pretty much no room to expand, and all they had was backstage area. And, then comes this once in a lifetime chance to actually remove a bunch of backstage buildings to expand the park and make it larger. And yet that expansion went towards a single IP. And, and that really ticked me off because it was like, you have this massive Disneyland which takes you to different realms, and within those realms there are different IPs, which I'm okay with. You go to Adventureland and then you can go on Indiana Jones ride, or go to Tomorrowland and go on a Star Wars ride, or something, based on Buzz Lightyear. So you have, these magical realms that can take you to whatever places you want to go. But the one time they get to really expand the perimeter of the park, they choose to give it entirely to one IP. And that to me just seems like a waste, because I know that Star Wars Land will last a long time, but I just don't see it lasting as long as, let's say, Tomorrowland would last, or the way Fantasyland would last. I mean, Tomorrowland and Fantasyland, the major, lands like Tomorrowland, Fantasyland, Frontierland, and Adventureland, those will go on forever because they're not based off of one IP. But eventually Star Wars Land, something will happen to it, and it's like, I guess Disney will deal with it again at that point, but that just really ticked me off. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Also, I think the fact that as of current, there's only 2 confirmed rides in a 14-acre space is pretty interesting. Although I know there'll be like major e-tickets. I'm not sure. Maybe the stuff around the land will make up for how much there is there, but I know it's a bit of, I think I'm bringing up a pretty irrelevant point, but also to me the fact that they're using the biggest expansion plot they've ever possibly had on 2 lands is, 2 rides, is pretty interesting to me.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, you've got, like, you look at another land which is like equal in size, and that'd be Fantasyland, and look at how many rides are in Fantasyland. I think there's like 13 or 14 rides in Fantasyland alone, and yet for an area the same size that they're adding to the park, there's only 2 rides. That just doesn't seem right, especially when Disneyland doesn't have that much space in it. Like, it just seems like a waste. It just, it seems like a waste.
Also, like, I've heard, I think it was rumored by Mice Chat a while ago that the rides didn't have both the rides, the Millennium Falcon one and the Stormtrooper attraction, wouldn't have very large capacities. Like, they'd only fit, like, I think 1,500 people per hour. Whilst if you look at, like, Pirates, Alex might be able to correct me on this, or Matt, I think it fits like 2,400 people an hour. So
that's correct.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to see how the lines and crowds will fare and how people will look at it. Maybe, like, I'm not sure if they'll go, oh, that was it. Well, I guess it all depends on what substance the attractions themselves have, I guess. But,
Yeah, and this brings up a similar case to how Pandora went down. I mean, I also brought up the fact that a couple podcasts ago, the fact that half of Star Wars Land is basically just queue for these the only 2 rides in the land. And I remember a rumor a while ago also, I'm not sure if this is confirmed or not, but in the Battle Escape attraction, guests are supposed to get up from their vehicles and switch over to different ones. I'm not sure if that's just a rumor or if it's confirmed or not, but yeah, the fact that that whole 14 acres is just used on those two e-ticket rides, and the fact that the capacity is so low for them just really, I don't know, I just have to ask why. They could have just put smaller attractions and maybe one major e-ticket attraction in half the space. Why use up all 14 acres just for 2 attractions and a couple of shops and restaurants? But I'm sure the Disney execs are going to say there's enough room there for expansion to maybe add a 3rd attraction there, but 3 attractions isn't really going to, I mean, an extra attraction isn't really going to make a huge and a big enough dent in the lines that are already going to be bananas for the 2 attractions there already.
I don't know if this would be a worthy comparison, but I was at Cars Lane opening day in 2012, and Cars Lane has one e-ticket. Maybe, I don't know if you'd call Mater's and Luigi's like C tickets or D tickets or whatever, but there's basically, I don't know if Races is very high capacity. I think that also fits about 1,500, but even up to today, the lines for Races are still the highest out of any attraction in both the parks usually. And it really holds up, but I'm not sure if Mater's and Luigi's make a very big difference to the line at Races, you know? Like, if it would really take that much of a dent in the toll. Because Star Wars Land's not going to have any of those smaller sort of attractions. Going to be 2 mega e-tickets. So it should be interesting to see how the crowds will fare and split for each other.
Yeah,
well, I was
go ahead, Alex.
I was gonna say, yeah, it's interesting. Like, I don't know. I don't think that they'll have room to add a 3rd attraction in that land. I mean, some people say that they will, but it looks like they're going to be building maintenance buildings around the new Star Wars land in areas that otherwise would be a 3rd attraction. I myself wish that they at least had 3. I mean, even though there's 2 e-tickets, I still wish they had at least a 3rd attraction to make it a little bit better, you know, like just, you know, because I know a lot of people, when they go to Disneyland, it's not like Walt Disney World at all. Walt Disney World, it's like you want to walk around and explore, but Disneyland has always been about getting on rides. And so it seems that what they've done in those 14 acres is build a little bit of Walt Disney World in those 14 acres, and that just doesn't work at Disneyland, you know? I mean, there's going to be a lot of dining experiences and things like that, which sounds really great. But I don't know. I still can't help but feel like it's a waste of land. And when you compare it to like New Orleans Square, for instance, which, you know, has 5 dining locations and, you know, 3 merchandise locations, and it's got 2 major e-ticket attractions, but on top of that, the entire thing sits on a main kitchen that feeds half the park, you know, and then on the upper floors they have a private club. So it's like they've used every last space in New Orleans Square, you know. So I would have liked to see just something a bit more at Star Wars Land. I mean, even if they said, you know what, 2nd floor areas in Star Wars Land will go to Club 33, you know, or there will be another large basement in Star Wars Land which will, you know, house maintenance areas or something to use up the land a little bit better and more efficiently. But there isn't. It's just a big flat land with a few restaurants, a few merchandise locations, and 2 rides. So, I don't know.
Yeah, and I just want to circle back to what you said about comparing Star Wars Land to Walt Disney World. I was going to bring up the fact that I'm sure the executives are thinking that part of the whole experience of Star Wars Land is going to be guests just walking around, wandering through the different little alleyways they can find, and just exploring every nook and cranny that they can have, and that they're counting on that, I'm sure, to be, I guess, quote, like the 3rd attraction there, because if what the Disney executives are saying about Star Wars Land is true, guests are going to have a field day just walking around through all the shops and through all the dining locations to see all the different, I guess, like exotic characters, and I don't know if they're going to have like exotic foods or anything there, but I'm sure that's really what the executives are also counting on, because immersiveness is really being hammered in every theme park, at least Universal and Disney. When it comes to Harry Potter Land, I've never been there, but I've heard it's great. But oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I interrupted there. But in regards to what you're saying about walking through an immersiveness, I recently had the chance a few months back to visit the Wizarding World, and I found most of my time in the land was just walking around Hogsmeade and all that, and I feel like the Imagineers really took a note out of Universal's playbook there about sort of walking through the movie sets, I guess you could call them. Mm-hmm. And because Harry Potter only has, or at least in Hollywood where I visited, only 2 attractions, the Forbidden Journey and Flight of the Hippogriff, I believe. And one of them is just like a roller coaster, and you've also got the big Kuka arm ride that everything's famous for, that everyone knows about, sorry. But yeah, I feel like a lot of comparisons could be made on the way that Disney are building and utilising the land in Star Wars Land compared to the Wizarding World.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Really
Well, I
interesting.
mean, another interesting thought about the usage of space would be like, I mean, they say, well, we're going to open this large 14-acre land, and you think about the size comparison. It's like the size of Tomorrowland. It's like you'd think that, oh, we're going to open this big 14-acre land. You almost expect a whole new Tomorrowland to open with all those rides and all those, experiences that you can get in the same amount of space. But it's like, oh no, 2 rides. I don't know. It's just, it bothers me.
Yeah, and I have a. This is just becoming an entire Star Wars Land discussion, but I have a feeling. I have a feeling that Star Wars Land is gonna. I don't want to say like stick out like a sore thumb when it comes to everything else surrounding it, because there's a reason that they're walling off every inch of Star Wars Land so much, and it's the fact that the guests outside of Star Wars Land can't see into it, and the guests inside will have this whole immersive experience. But it just doesn't really make any sense to leave. You're basically leaving Disneyland to go into a separate third park, which is Star Wars Land, and it's really I don't know, it's just really bothering to me.
Well, you know what? As I was saying in a previous episode, that there's what you said is exactly true. It's almost as if they're building a third park and it's just linked into Disneyland. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is that they're hoping that Star Wars Land will be kind of separate, and that it'll draw a lot of people away from the already overcrowded rides like Peter Pan. And so they're hoping that when Star Wars Land opens, it'll act like a sponge that will kind of take away the crowds from the rest of the park. But the 3 of us know one thing for sure. When they open Star Wars Land, they're going to increase the capacity of the park and add extra thousands of people every day into the park. So it's not going to make a difference,
Yeah, it's true. I'm personally, I don't know how you guys feel about actually experiencing Star Wars Land eventually, but although it has its flaws within its design of Disneyland Park itself, sort of plopping it in, rerouting the berm and all that, I'm incredibly excited to see what the Imagineers have designed and what they have to offer, and to see something almost completely new. Although I have my gripes at the project, I'm still very optimistic about it, personally.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of us can say the same. I'm really excited for Star Wars Land also, and just to, like I said, walk around and just see what the Imagineers have come up with, like you said.
Yeah, me too.
Oh boy, let's try and circle back to the original topic, though. I wanted to bring up the fact that I believe it's Tokyo Disneyland, which the Tomorrowland there has 2 stories, and I'm just wondering, why can't we have something like that here in Disneyland to kind of take away, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but just try to add more space to the land, whether that be vertical,
Yeah, I've had that thought before actually too. I don't know, sometimes I like to sit down and sort of draw up what I would do just for fun. But I think, as you were saying, what they've done with some of the newer Tomorrowlands and all the other parks is, even though most of the parks, I think all of them have more land than Disneyland, they've figured out really good ways to utilise the space. As you said with, I think, Shanghai, they've got I think one area they have Buzz Lightyear and the little Stitch attraction, but there's there's elevated walkways circling all around the land, sort of spreading out the crowds and adding this new layer of dimension to efficiently utilize the space that they were given. I think it's really genius, and something that we could honestly really it would be really great. What was I saying? I feel like us Disneyland fans, it's pretty necessary to have that in Disneyland, a park that's already pretty crowded, just to alleviate all that and sort of add a new layer of dimension to the lands themselves, especially Tomorrowland.
Oh yeah, I agree. We could definitely really use a second level to Tomorrowland. I mean, we already have places in Tomorrowland that could be used as a second level. I mean, if you think about it, you could have, an elevated walkway that leads from the front of the land all the way to where the old Astrojets, Tomorrowland jets used to be up on that second platform. And I was thinking, like, it'd be really cool if they could just, put, like, the Shanghai version of the, I think they're called, like, the jet packs, you know, and then have that there, and then, of course, the walkway would lead up to the entrance to Space Mountain, so that way you don't have to start off on the bottom level and then, go up. So, I mean, yeah, there's places in Tomorrowland that already have 2 floors that they could lead up into, and yeah, we could definitely use that.
I love that idea, Alex. Alex. Sorry. I think it's really clever because it alleviates the crowds from the ground while also creating like a new experience for the guests and a pretty unique element to a theme park land.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Especially the fact that we already have sort of walkways up there with the old tracks.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've heard rumors that they were gonna turn the. I'm not sure if they were rumors or if I'm just making things up in my head, but I'm gonna say that I've heard rumors that they were gonna turn the old People Mover tracks into just like elevated walk. I don't think it was a rumor. I just saw it in the YouTube comment, I think. But the People Mover tracks would be turned into just walkways for the guests, and they'd be able to wander around up above, maybe add a restaurant or some shops up there for guests to experience. And I mean, Tomorrowland, out of all the lands, I feel like would really benefit from this second level of I guess just second level, but yeah.
I agree with you 100% on that.
Yeah.
Sort of, I just want to take a quick side tangent for a second, since we're sort of comparing it to Shanghai's Tomorrowland. Alex, I know you've raised, I don't know if it was like the finale of one of your original Disneyland history videos, that you don't think, I'm probably saying this wrong, that you don't think that fondly of many of like the other parks, like Magic Kingdom and stuff like that, compared to like the original Disneyland. Could you, like, I've always been kind of curious about that.
Wait, I didn't understand your question.
I feel like, I'm probably saying this wrong. I remember, like, I think it was in the finale of Disneyland History Today, you said that you weren't going to cover any of the other parks as you don't find them, like, that interesting history-wise.
Oh, yes. Well, okay, so...
Sorry, I just kind of, I don't know, it just popped into my head. I'm hijacking the podcast.
Well, basically, it's... okay, so if you think about, like, Disney California Adventure, there's really not much history to it. It hasn't been around long enough for there to be, like, a whole bunch of layers. I mean, really, all I can say is, like, things like, Monsters Incorporated used to be what's it called?
Superstar Limo.
Superstar Limo. God, I hated that ride.
What a ride.
And then that's pretty much it. Like, I just go, like, what would my episode be about? It would be about me comparing Superstar Limo to, Monsters Inc. And I don't think that that's very interesting in my own opinion.
I agree with you.
And then, and then there's things like, I would run out of so much stuff to say because there's not much that interests me. Like, I could talk about how the old entrance was compared to Buena Vista Street, but then I'd just be doing comparisons. I wouldn't really be giving people history lessons, or anything. And I'd say, like, history-wise, to me, the only other park that has enough history to it that I could make episodes on would be Magic Kingdom Park at Walt Disney World.
Yeah.
But even then, there's not much to it. Like, I can't give stories about the individual Imagineers that created the attractions because there are none. There's no individual stories. There's no background to anything. It's just like, oh, this group of people who isn't as famous as Marty Sklar or Mark Davis, I'd be mentioning Imagineers that are obscure even today. And so it wasn't interesting compared to Disneyland, where there's just so much to say, and and then walk up to it and then talk about how it works and how it runs, because all the other rides and other theme parks run the same way that Disneyland's does. The Haunted Mansion over there is the same Omnimover type ride system that I already explained in my Haunted Mansion video.
Yeah.
So there wasn't enough, in my opinion, to create history episodes based on those, and even then, I hate all other Disney parks. I think they're really low quality. I mean, the only other Disney park that I actually like is Animal Kingdom, but there wasn't much in there last time I visited, and even with Pandora, it's just, I don't know.
None of them sort of have that charm.
Yeah, nothing beats Disneyland, in my opinion.
Sorry, I sort of just hijacked it all and put you on the spot there. I just sort of called back to that in my mind for some reason.
It's okay.
Sorry about that.
I think we kind of touched on that in the preview, or it might have been 2 episodes ago, about how Disneyland stands out from a lot of the other theme parks worldwide. And I think we brought up the fact that there's just really nothing in the other parks that is just that it just has the charm that Disneyland's has. I can't remember right off the top of my head, but let's see. I wanted to circle around to the fact that back to the Disneyland problem. I feel like Disneyland really doesn't have any more space to insert all their IPs, and if they were to, they would have to either retheme entire attractions or demolish them completely to build new things. And I wanted to get your guys' take on if you guys would be, I guess, willing to let go of some of your favorite attractions. Okay, not willingly. I'll give you guys a scenario. Disney announces that they're going to replace the Haunted Mansion with a different IP themed attraction, and I wanted to get your guys' opinion on just what your whole emotions would be, and just your ideas on whether oh my gosh, what am I trying to say? On what you guys would think if that would happen to any of the other attractions.
It's interesting because you posed
go ahead.
Haunted Mansion, which is like probably, I don't know if I'd call it possibly probably the most famous ride in the park. Like, even with my friends at school who aren't massive mega fans, some of them have been to Disneyland. When I say Haunted Mansion, they know exactly what I'm talking about. It's such a distinct and famous sort of thing, and if it was, say, like, I don't know, it's very different to say, like, oh, you're going to get rid of the many adventures of Winnie the Pooh, Like, It's really different comparing that to Mansion, because it's such a masterful piece of work, It's like mostly everything is just done so well, created at such a legendary time, and me personally, I don't know if I'd be willing to let go of that classic experience for something new.
Okay, Alex, since it's your favorite attraction, why don't you go ahead and explain your thoughts?
Never. Well, no, I mean, if they had said that they were going to replace Mansion, I would not be, I would not let that happen. I mean, I would, be laying down on the ground in front of the bulldozers. But, I mean, had it been something else, like if it had been like Toontown, for instance, I'd be like all for it. I'd be like, yeah, like let's get rid of Toontown and put something new in there, and so, I mean, there are certain rides that I'd be willing to let go of in order for something better to come in. But, I mean, that depends on how classic and how popular they are, because, if it's something like, for instance, we were talking about getting rid of Storybook Land at one point, in order to expand and make a better Casey Jr. ride, just like the one at Disneyland Paris. And so for that one, I was like, oh, you know what? I would like that new roller coaster type Casey Jr. ride a lot more than what we have now, and I'd be willing to let go of Storybook Land to get it. So, because, I mean, to me, Storybook Land, I never go on it, and when I do, it's, the same models, the same thing, it doesn't, there's no movement, there's no, kinetic energy in it. It's just riding past a bunch of models, and I feel like, oh, well, But I don't know. So if it were something as popular as Haunted Mansion, no, I wouldn't be all for it. But it would be based on a per ride basis.
Mm-hmm. I think I'm going to agree with Alex on that. To me, it all depends with what attraction they're planning on replacing. Like, I remember originally when they announced they were getting rid of Tower of Terror, I just moaned and groaned about it. I was like distraught about it. I was incredibly upset. But then when I wrote Guardians, I realized, it's okay. Like, it's pretty good. To me, it's not on the caliber of Tower, but hey, it's here now. What else can I do? I guess they did possibly the best that they could have with that space, because what else can you do? It's a drop ride. But say if they were going to get rid of, Winnie the Pooh and just retheme it to another dark ride, you could change a lot about that. But with Tower, it was just an elevated drop system, and I think they did as much as they could. But when you say sort of get rid of Mansion or replace it with another IP, would you mean sort of demolishing the facade, the show building, or going from the ground up, or just sort of re-skinning it? Because I feel as though I'd be very, very opposed to just re-skinning a classic.
No, yeah, I meant just demolishing the facade, everything, and just replacing it from the ground up with a new attraction.
That'd be a tragedy.
Yeah, there's another type, of example, for instance, is when they replaced the Adventure Through Inner Space with Star Tours. Mm-hmm. I mean, they got rid of a really good attraction, which was Adventure Through Inner Space, but look what they replaced it with, an even better attraction. Mm-hmm. So I mean, sometimes, if in order to get something better, you have to destroy what's already there. But I feel like lately what Disney's been replacing their attractions with is something that's less than what was already there. So Tower of Terror, I rode it once and that was it for me. But I was too scared of the drops. But what I did recognize was that Tower of Terror was a really high quality attraction. And the one at Walt Disney World is better, but I mean, for what we had, it was high quality. And I was hoping that that when the contract for use of the Twilight Zone name was over, I was hoping that they would just reskin the attraction to continue to be a haunted tower of some sort. But instead they go with Guardians of the Galaxy, which fits nowhere in with Hollywoodland. and I just felt like Guardians of the Galaxy, I didn't like the movie. The movie had a personality that just did not match with mine, so I didn't like it. But I felt like what they replaced Tower of Terror with was something that was less than Tower of Terror's quality, and I don't believe in that. I always believe that in the Walt Disney way of doing things, and what Walt Disney did was, if he replaced something, it was always with something much better. So, I mean, here's a good example. He brought this attraction in 1956 called the Viewliner, and it was basically the monorail but on railroad tracks, and it ran around Tomorrowland, and it gave you like beautiful sights of Tomorrowland and then riding next to the Disneyland Railroad. But then he went to Germany in Cologne and found the Alweg monorail and said, I want that instead of the Viewliner, and he went and replaced it, and so that was something that just totally bumped up like 10 times better. So but
that's a really good example.
Yeah, if Disney said, we're going to replace Haunted Mansion with something that's like something at least twice as good, I'd be all for it. But I mean, then again, it'd be hard to imagine something that's better than Haunted Mansion.
Yeah. I have to agree with you there, Alex. If it's better than what we have, then I'm for it. But if we're going to replace it with something lesser, then what's the point? Just to inject an IP into the park.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting topic.
And that could go for a whole number of attractions in Disneyland and California Adventure, mostly in California Adventure. Like you guys said, the Tower of Terror. I love the Tower of Terror. I was deeply saddened when they announced that they were replacing it with Guardians of the Galaxy. I remember exactly where I was to the time and to the date when they announced it on Twitter, and I was distraught. Let's just put it that way. But I agree with Manny about how they did the best that they could. About it's just a drop ride, but I have a feeling that if they really put in the extra work, they could have come up with something even better that didn't necessarily have to be Guardians of the Galaxy themed. It could have been another Marvel property, since they were already going to push Marvel into that side of the park. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I have another example. Pixar Pier.
Oh my goodness.
So, it
Everything circles back to Pixar Pier.
It does. It's like the center of the problem right now. It's like, you have the current Paradise Pier, which is Victorian themed, and it's the architecture that they have there is beautiful. And they, and then you got Silly Symphony Swings, which looks so much better than the Orange Stinger. Do you remember that, the Orange Stinger?
I remember that, yeah.
So Silly Symphony Swings, you have all that looks so much better, and then they're going for something that's going to make it look less. So Pixar Pier, it's like, oh, they're going to retheme a perfectly beautiful roller coaster, the California Screamin', perfectly beautiful roller coaster, with something less, as beautiful, something that it looks disgusting. And, and then, of course, the architecture is probably going to change in order to reflect something more Pixar-like, so...
But what architecture reflects the Pixar type?
I don't know. I have a feeling that the area that's going to be, what's it called? Inside Out. I have a feeling that they're going to, really change that little corner to look colorful and rainbow-like, because it kind of looked that way in the concept art.
Yeah.
It kind of showed walls. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, it was sort of like a curved-in sea facade, behind the spinner itself, wasn't it?
Right. And so I just don't see how that's going to look better than what it looks like today. I mean, granted, there's a big hole where there used to be a ride, and I'm all for them adding a ride there, but not if the ride is going to change its surroundings in that way,
Another interesting thing I think about Pixar Pier is, as you guys said, what kind of architecture is Pixar? You think about sort of Star Wars Land, they're theming it to a planet in the Star Wars system, but when you think Pixar, they're theming it after a specific movie studio's catalog, I don't know if that's a good way to go, to sort of just, it's like if you did Disney Pier, what are you going to put there? You're going to put spinners, you don't think of Disney itself as a theme, you think of it as something that has themes encompassed within it. So, I don't know, I'm really two-sided on Pixar Pier.
Okay, so you asked me what architecture is going to change. Look at the carousel. The carousel has beautiful architecture right now, but what's going to be there in the future?
A giant Jessie statue.
Jessie. Yes, a giant Jessie. Of all the Pixar, Toy Story characters, why Jessie? She's the most annoying critter of all of them. I mean, I would have rather have a giant Woody than a giant Jessie.
When you think about it, there really is no... well, I guess besides Toy Story Midway Mania, it's smack dab right in between the carousel and the Incredicoaster. Jessie is just right... I might be remembering it wrong, but from what I remember, Jessie's right on the outside of the carousel, whatever they theme it to. And it's in between the carousel and the exit for California Screamin', and it's just... why? That's just all I can say.
Another Another weird thing about the Jessie statue is, like, I know many people also hate all the Toy Story lands around the world, but they feature those sort of similar statues, but most of them, they have, like, multiple of those. They have, like, a Rex, they have a Jessie, but with Pixar here, it seems that we're literally just getting one giant character statue and no others. It's just so strange.
Yeah.
Like, you'd think that maybe, like, they'd put, I don't know, a Woody in front of Midway Mania or something, but from the concept art, it just seems that they're going to put one statue in and nothing else in that grand giant scale.
Yeah, I mean, just imagine standing out in front of Little Mermaid and you're going to take a picture of Paradise Pier and then there's a giant statue of Jessie in marring your beautiful photograph. It's just like, no.
Oh my gosh, I don't want to imagine that.
And okay, and you've got Pixar Pier with a giant Mickey Mouse face on the Ferris wheel. How does that make sense?
I really want to know what conversations went on behind the scenes to create this land. I want to know who was pushing the idea, who was rejecting it, because I feel like it's really mishmashed, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I think whoever planned it, they were all having a little bit too much of Gaston's brew.
That, ladies and gentlemen, ends our... No. I wanted to bring up one more little tidbit about Pixar Pier, and the fact that there's a giant Jessie statue. If there's a giant Jessie statue in Pixar Pier, I don't feel like it would be thematically good to have a walk-around Jessie character along with the statue.
Yeah, I remember on I think it was the WDW Magic boards, they were discussing Toy Story Land, and they were saying, well, can they have meet and greets, because there's going to be a statue of Jessie, Woody, and Buzz. Can they still have meet and greets within the land? Because that's just not thematically, that's really thematically inconsistent, you know?
Yeah, because there's already a huge statue of Jessie, and you're like, oh, look, there's Jessie, but then you see Jessie actually walking just around the corner, and you're like, oh, wait, I thought Jessie was over there. I don't know.
It sort of takes you out of it. Even though it's a pretty minor thing, it can affect your whole experience and how immersed you are.
Mm-hmm.
Also, because
it's like one of those...
Immersiveness is a really loose term when it comes to California Adventure.
It's like one of those movie-style hostage situations. Like, which one's the real Jessie?
Oh, my gosh.
And, like, also, you could compare it, or you probably couldn't. Instead of, like, the Mickey face on the Ferris wheel, you realise that is not Mickey. That's just his face on a wheel. It's an icon. You can still have a walk around Mickey. But with this, it's not like they're putting Jessie's face on a logo. They're putting a three-dimensional figure that I don't know, presume would have sound effects like all the other Toy Story lands, trying to give it the illusion of realism. Whilst with something like, say that, I don't know, bring back to Mickey face, they're not trying to give you the illusion that it's actually Mickey Mouse's head up on a Ferris wheel, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So many issues.
Well, we could talk about Pixar Pier for a whole, probably 3 more hours, but
Agreed.
I'm sure none of you guys have the time for that, so we'll probably have to... Actually, we already did a whole topic on Paradise Pier a while back. I just remembered.
Are we still going to talk about Indy? Wasn't that one of the schedules?
Yes.
Just wondering.
I was actually just gonna segue to the Indiana Jones adventure.
Yay.
All right. I recently, for those of you guys watching, this is coming out on a Monday, I put out a Historyland video on the Indiana Jones adventure, and Mr. Ready Set Disney over here is set to have his ready.
Very soon.
Part 2, because it's going to be a two-part kind of episode. And
collaboration.
Yes. So you guys should definitely go over to his channel, subscribe, and he'll post the video, and you guys
It'll be up very soon. Very, very soon. Within a few days of this podcast airing, I think. Or even before.
You heard it. You heard it here first, folks. It'll be out very soon.
Directly from the source.
But I wanted to get your guys' opinion on the whole Indiana Jones adventure attraction as a whole, because for me, I know it's one of my favorite attractions in the whole park. I know it's one of my family's favorite attractions in the park, just because of how immersed you get in the story. The queue is just it's really unbelievable of how much they did in the little space that they had for the attraction and the queue. And I just wanted to get your guys' opinion on just the whole ride as a whole.
Oh, man. What an attraction. Just a miracle of Imagineering the Indiana Jones adventure is. So many great elements, just things that the Imagineers can do, you know, sound effects, visual effects, just theming the queue. It all comes together to create this big story in such a harmonious way that it feels like none of those things are sort of beckoning for your attention, but they're all part of this one distinct, you know, it feels real, the experience. Like, it feels like very natural. It doesn't feel forced like a theme park attraction, especially in the queue segments.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just wanted to bring up a little tidbit about the Indiana Jones adventure that many of you listeners might not know. So, during the boulder scene, the boulder is not actually moving towards you. It's the walls that move. And I just feel like that is such an amazing engineering feat to have the walls move. That's just really amazing to think about.
I actually have that in the script for the part 2 episode. I'm gonna mention that because I love that effect. I remember last time I rode the attraction in June, I made it a point in my mind to tell my family to look back so we could sort of see what was going on with the walls. And you don't realize that these massive hydraulics like pushing these walls back for something that like not many people would even notice. Because it's done so well. It's just like, I feel like, I don't know if that's a thing that would still be done today with Imagineering.
You know,
absolutely not.
I've actually got kind of a funny story about that.
Ooh, do tell.
So, okay, so when I used to work in New Orleans Square, when I was a cook at Blue Bayou, our break area was right alongside the building for the Indiana Jones adventure. And so I'd have to literally travel out of New Orleans Square and go all the way outside the park just to go to my break area. And it's really loud back there because they have the massive 16-cylinder engine that powers the hydraulics for that room. And it's this loud engine. It's about the size of it's the same size as an engine that is put inside of a diesel locomotive, and it's just loud. And the other thing too is you can hear the sound effects from that room. So I'd say like every 5 to 8 seconds, you hear the loud crash of the boulder, and so you can hear it. You can hear it from all the way over behind Splash Mountain. It's just this loud, this huge bass. And, you know, and then of course, like trying to be on my break area, being in the break area, I couldn't call anybody on my breaks because the engine was so loud that like you couldn't hear anything. So like I'd call somebody and all you hear in the background is so it's just like really annoying. So it's just funny because I'd have people be like, "Oh, you need to call me on your break." I can't. I'm working in New Orleans Square today, and
the engine's going
Indiana
at it
Jones
again.
Adventure. Yeah. So,
you know what? I feel like
yeah.
I've actually noticed that before from like downtown Disney for some reason. You know when there's like that picnic area where the tram drop-off is? I honestly feel like I've felt that before, but I've never actually had it sort of confirmed to me that I felt like this like low bass sort of trembling feeling coming from like the massive green show building. So I guess that kind of confirms my theory there.
Yeah.
I was gonna say also that whenever you're on the Disneyland Railroad, just coming out of Main Street, I always hear this loud noise from, I'm assuming, the area of where the Indiana Jones Adventure is, and I guess I know now that it's the attraction.
Yeah, it literally creates a loud bass boom every 8 seconds, and it's incredibly loud. You can, and you know, when you're in the backstage areas, you can hear it all the way as far as Splash Mountain, and it's just like,
wow,
it's incredible. Yeah.
Well, you guys heard it here first. Inside tip from the source, the previous source of the Disneyland cast member, Alex Historian.
The more you know. It's so
But
amazing.
what I wanted to say about the attraction that I like is actually the design of its show building. If you think about like other Disney show buildings, such as Haunted Mansion or Pirates of the Caribbean, the track layout for the attraction is spread out. It's like in Pirates of the Caribbean, it's flat and it just zigzags through the show building. Same thing with Haunted Mansion. It's largely just a spread out show building where the track kind of weaves through it. But when you look at the Indiana Jones show building, it's several layers, several stories that are layered on top of each other. And in the basement is the loading area for the ride, and then you go up and you travel up further, and the Cavern of Bubbling Death sits above the loading area, and then you travel through the Cavern of Bubbling Death, and you double back on the track, and then you can go underneath the bridge, and it's got all these layers to it. And it was designed that way because obviously they didn't have enough room to build a massive show building, so they had to make the track zigzag and layer itself. But it's an interesting way to build an attraction is to layer the attraction like that, and they don't really do that with anything else except for I think Splash Mountain. It has 3 different layers to it, so 3 different stories that you traverse when you're on the flume. But other than that, like other attraction show buildings, they're just flat, expansive show buildings.
Isn't it just it's such a testament to how well designed the attraction is? Like the fact that like all these like they had to do that out of necessity, as you said, Alex, layering on top of each other. But say you go into the Cavern of Bubbling Death, it has such kinetic energy to it because it's like a lot of the scenes, they're not walled away from each other. You can see the other jeeps sort of travelling through. And they sort of layered that idea of making it multi-leveled into the attraction's sort of story itself of it being like a broken down temple. It's just phenomenal.
Oh yeah, it looks really great. Like, and like you said, you can see the jeeps going through it. My favorite part actually of the attraction is when your jeep leaves the mummy room and you're about to turn to go into the bug room, and as you turn, you can see the vehicle ahead of you about to go over the bridge. And when it does that, the seating area of the vehicle actually leans backwards to simulate suddenly accelerating. And so my favorite part of the attraction is to watch the vehicle ahead of me suddenly tilt backwards and then start forward. That's my favorite part of the ride.
That's super
Yeah, and
cool.
that's really another amazing part of the attraction, which is the ride vehicle. I mean, they had to basically just invent this new, I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head, but this new,
Enhanced motion vehicle.
that's it. I just made a whole video on this, and I can't even remember the name. But, yeah, the ride vehicle for this attraction is just amazing. I know for sure a while back, before I was all into Disney and everything, I had no idea that the vehicle actually moved on its own. I just thought it was just the terrain that the vehicle was riding on, but it's really just an amazing accomplishment to whoever, I can't remember who created it, but to whoever made that vehicle, big thumbs up from all 3 of us.
Virtual thumbs up your way.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting that the dinosaur attraction in Animal Kingdom uses the same ride vehicle and almost the same identical layout of the track itself.
Oh yeah, I really like Dinosaur. That one's really great.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. There's so many good things about the Indy attraction itself. I feel like we can't even cover them all. It's possibly, I'd go as far to call it the best attraction in Disneyland Park. I know it's probably a controversial statement, but coming from the perspective of me when I was younger, I was petrified of that ride. And this was like when I was in like the 3rd or 5th grade. I thought I was going to die.
Me too.
It's so convincing. It's incredible because like some of the rides, I don't know, I wasn't one of those kids who try to like point out that stuff was fake on the rides because that just takes away from it. But Indy, you genuinely feel like you're in peril.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's so incredibly well done. Everything's really well calculated. You can tell that they've put thought into every detail of the attraction. And to me, that's what makes all the Disney attractions, the best Disney attractions, stand apart from any other park. That attention to detail.
It's funny that we talk about the Indiana Jones Adventure because it's the Indiana Jones Adventure that made me want to become a Disney historian.
Oh, hey.
Really? Yeah, and you see, when I was a little kid, about the same age as Manny, what you were saying, you were in, third or fifth grade, and I was also scared of the attraction as well. I was so afraid. I was always thinking, like, Dad, why would you want to ride this? You're about to be crushed by a boulder. You're going to go over lava. You're going to, why do you want to kill yourself? So I always used to be so afraid of the ride. And I hated going to Disneyland. I hated Disneyland entirely because
really?
Because Disneyland was real to me. So being on Thunder Mountain and being on a runaway mine train, who's controlling it? Going down two waterfalls on Pirates of the Caribbean. It's how do you know you're going to survive the waterfall? So Disneyland to me was real and it scared me, and I hated Disneyland. But what made me start to have interest in Disneyland was riding Indiana Jones Adventure, because I used to close my eyes and I'd cover my eyes with my hands. And I remember the first time I actually opened my eyes, and it was because we were on the rickety bridge over the cavern of bubbling death, and my dad said, "Alex, open your eyes, just look." And he said, "Look, the bridge isn't moving." And so I looked over, and for the first time I actually was so amazed, because he was right. The bridge was completely stationary. It was the vehicle that was tilting around and rocking. And that made me go, wow, this scene is not even real. And my dad pointed out that the lava wasn't real, and I looked at it, and suddenly it sparked this huge interest in me, how did they fool me like that? And so all my life I've been so interested in how they do these special effects and how they design the rides. And then I became so interested in the history and what became before these rides. And so it all started for me at riding the Indiana Jones Adventure and uncovering my eyes for the first time.
That's actually a really cool story.
Yeah, thank you, Indiana Jones Adventure, for bringing us Alex, a historian.
Oh, shucks, you guys.
That would actually, I don't want to intrude on your podcast again, but that'd be a pretty cool topic for another episode, how we all found our love of Disney and all that kind of stuff.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm gonna write that down. Because that's a really great topic, actually. Let me see. I'll write it down later, but I'll probably forget, so hopefully I won't. I don't think I will, but I just wanted to bring up one more point, and that's kind of circling back to what you guys said, and it's the fact that I feel like the Indiana Jones Adventure is peak Disneyland ride. It's just at the very tip top when it comes to immersiveness and the theming, the ride experience, everything about it is just, I feel like it's way above all of the other attractions, and I don't want to, I guess, offend anyone who thinks that, Pirates is better or anything else like that. I just feel like when it comes to everything as a whole coming together, it just meshes so perfectly to create this perfect attraction, really.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Well, what's funny is, okay, so we've been praising this attraction since we started this topic, and everybody loves Indiana Jones Adventure, and whether or not it's your favorite ride, it's certainly on the top 5 list at least, Yeah. But what's funny is my roommate hates the Indiana Jones Adventure.
Oh my god.
He thinks it's one of the worst rides in Disneyland.
What?
Yes, because and guess what his reasons are. His reasons are our reasons. One, he thinks it's not very immersive. He thinks that it's not themed well. He thinks it wasn't designed correctly, and he thinks that it's just one of the most boring rides in the park.
Oh my gosh. I can't even imagine.
That's amazing
Yeah,
how
I mean,
it's
like
boring.
it can all be flipped.
Yeah, I mean, I almost killed my roommate, but you know, that's what he thinks. And I asked him, I said, well, what makes you think that it's not immersive? And he goes like, oh, well, you know, if you look at the walls of the temple, it's not real walls, they're just painted on. You know, and he goes like, you know, there's like only 3 animatronics in the whole ride. The rest is just booby traps, you know. And he says like, you know, and then like the entire ride, he says, relies on, you know, you're riding the vehicle that does all the moving for you, so nothing's really happening. So he says that the ride is very uneventful, and it's not immersive, and it's not themed well, and it doesn't represent the movies at all.
That's really interesting, actually.
Ah.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you could partially say that about a lot of other Disney rides, like how he mentioned the walls are just painted on. You could say that about almost every other Disneyland attraction.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's really
Even
true.
the castle. Well, I guess not the castle, but you guys can picture what I'm saying.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. I think sometimes it's just about suspending your disbelief for a little bit. I guess that's what Disneyland's all about in a way, you know?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Sort of letting go
Yeah.
of what you think is real and going into this realm of where everything is possible, you know?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's basically like almost the foundation of what Disneyland is. Leaving the world of today, entering the world of yesterday, tomorrow in fantasy.
True. It's really true.
Yep. Yep.
And I think that we might just be out of time for this week's podcast. I don't want it to get too long, and I know we have a whole lot of stuff to talk about when it comes to Indiana Jones Adventure, but we're going to have to shelve that for a future episode, unfortunately, because I can tell we all really love talking about this attraction, because it really is amazing. For those of you that haven't ridden it, who are scared to ride it, just ride it. You'll be amazed. Yeah, that's really all I have to say about the ride.
And if you're like Alex, maybe it'll change your life. Who knows?
Yeah. Maybe it'll turn you into a big nerd like me.
Oh my gosh. Alex isn't a nerd. He's just saying that. You guys won't become nerds when you ride the ride, don't worry.
That should be the ride's new slogan.
Alright guys, that's just about wrap up this episode. I hope you all enjoyed, and we want to hear your thoughts on whether Disney relies too much on nostalgia. I want to hear your thoughts of my quote Disneyland Problem, and we want to hear your opinions on the Indiana Jones Adventure attraction. And don't forget to check out Alex and Manny on YouTube, because they both make really amazing videos, exceptional. I don't think that was the right word I wanted to use, but really great videos. I can't think of any synonyms to amazing and great right now, but go ahead and subscribe to them, guys. Give them a like, and you might just find your favorite YouTube channel on YouTube. And Alex, if you don't mind, why don't you go ahead and tell the viewers how they can support you?
Sure. If you'd like to support me and my little vlogging ventures at Disneyland, you can go and find the app for your phone called Venmo, spelled Venmo, and you just create an account and then look for my username, which is @AYAlexander, and you can send a transfer request to me for however much money you'd like. You know, if you want to send me $1 million, that would be absolutely wonderful. And yeah, that's it. That's all you have to do. It's easy.
And you guys can go check out Ready Set Disney on his Twitter, his Instagram. It's all linked on his channel, and I'll put it down in the description for you guys for the easy access. And you guys can follow me on Twitter too if you want. And I mean, I post occasionally about Disney stuff, but I mean, my username on Twitter is Matterhorn Matt, so of course I post things on Disney related on Twitter. But you guys can buy my t-shirts also. My t-shirts are grade A, Matterhorn Matt approved, Alex the Historian approved, Ready Set Disney approved.
Actually, need to
And-
pick one up.
Oh yeah, me too actually. I haven't bought one for myself.
That's great.
Maybe for Christmas I'll buy one for myself.
Oh. How sad.
Unless one of you lucky viewers out
Yeah.
there wants to buy one for me. No,
Yeah,
just kidding.
someone buy Matterhorn Matt's shirt just for him, okay?
It's like some weird gift-giving circle.
Oh my goodness. That's just about going to wrap up this episode. I hope you all enjoyed, and as always, have a great big beautiful tomorrow.